Yes, I'm Gavin, Patterson, Director of Data at MEF. I'm going to talk to you today about, everything that we're talking about, which is consumer trust, fraud and payments. So it's great to have followed Andrew because he's perfectly illustrated why personal identity and trust in personal identity is so important, that I'm who I say I am, that a brand's what it says it is, and also knowing your customer. And we're going to look at some consumer research that we do every year. We'll come to that in a minute. There we go. So, MEF data, we do three things. We look at mobile landscape information, business messaging and consumer behaviour, which we're going to focus on today. Mobile landscape, we cover 280 markets, 170 regulators provide us with information. We put all that together. Business messaging, we're doing as well. Main messaging channels, SMS, RCS and WhatsApp. And we're doing that now with a number of our members. That will be available soon, and then we'll come out to you and ask for feedback as well. You can participate in that. But then consumer behaviour, which is the third thing that we're doing here today. And it's the biggest piece of research that we do within MEF. It's been running for 11 years now, and the latest survey finds have just closed. So that's what we're going to be looking at. So these 15 markets that you see here on the left, we did last year. Together they're about 55% of the global population, 60% of active users, active mobile users, and 65% of connected, so those with a smartphone. We added Turkey and Poland this year, and it looks at everything. It looks at trust and smartphone behaviours, the identity, data harms, payments, everything that you can see on the list here. And with the new report that's coming out on the back of this data as well, we've maybe seen a turning point in what we've seen been happening with trust over the 11 years we've been running this. So, the three previous trust studies that you can see up here have all really seen a lot of negative attitude, negative sentiment towards trust in sharing personal data and how it's shared, who with, the controls around it. The top one, I think you see there, that was the 2022 report. Generally, there was a lack of positivity exacerbated by concerns over controls and security. 2023, users still felt concerns were not being addressed, their concerns about sharing information and who they were sharing it with and how they were sharing it. And they tended to manage risk by abstaining from data sharing. And last year we saw there was increased awareness about how their data was being used, but it didn't necessarily improve trust because you also needed greater confidence in the controls and safeguards around that. Now, without prejudging the current report, I don't think it's out yet. Nick's at the back. He'll tell me, or you can tell me this later. It looks like there's been a significant change, a marked uptick in sentiment. So we'll start with trust, then I'll look at some of the other main themes that we're going to be going through today. So in terms of trust, so how do we measure trust? So the survey that we run, the consumer research that we run, has hundreds of questions, thousands of answer variables, but these are the three key indicators that you see here that we benchmark to measure overall trust in what's happening in terms of sharing personal identity data. Because it's the perception of these that drives consumer engagement. So awareness, when I share my personal data, I'm aware of how it may be used. Control, so when I share it, I remain in control of it. And also the safeguards around it. I believe that there are sufficient safeguards to keep my data out of the hands of fraudsters. So this is what we've seen. A significant upward shift in trust. Now, by significant, I mean more than the margin of error, which is 3%. So, anything above or below 3%, we think is, a significant sort of return. So, up 5 points from last year. Trust now measured at 60%. Whatever that means, but it's at the top end, not the bottom end. It's growing quite significantly, and a higher trust index indicates increased engagement, so more activity, greater frequency of usage, and better opportunities for all of us to monetize. So this increase in trust was driven by all the three components that we benchmark. So increased awareness of how data is used at 5 points on last year, improved perceptions of control at 5 points, and greater confidence in the safeguard at 4%. So things are looking up. but we obviously see different stories. If you look at individual markets, this is the average over everything that we survey. So we have that average 5-point rise in trust across all markets, but we've seen a significant change, which was 3% or higher, or lower, in 11 of the 15 markets we can compare. Obviously, Turkey and Poland at the end here, we just did for the first time, so we can't compare them. 11 of the 15 markets, all at different stages of development, have seen that significant change. India up 17 points to 80% trust, 80% trust. Mexico at 14 points to 73% trust. Maybe just sort of correcting the downturn you saw, I think there's a point on here, on the second from the left there, the downturn that we saw in 2024. And then you've got Japan, Italy, USA, all the way back to Egypt. But in fact, the highest levels of trust are all seen in emerging and developing economies. So the average trust index, we've got there 60%, which is level with the USA, and every country above that line is emerging or developing. The only 3 emerging economies that aren't all at the end are Brazil, which actually fell 3 points to just below the line, and Poland and Turkey, which arguably should not be included in the category, but we've taken the IMF classifications for developing. So every other country below this line is advanced or developed. We've got Japan, USA, Canada, all the European countries. So this is actually what trust looks like when you split up the developed and the developing. 2 very different stories. Trust is significantly higher in emerging and developing economies, 66% versus 52%. Now this could be because there's more visibility of issues in the developed world, more reporting and coverage of harmful attacks, or just greater experience of harm because more users there are being targeted by bad actors. Now, at the same time, though, the improvement in sentiment is strongest in the advanced and the developed, up 5 points from 47 to 52%, versus a 2% increase in the emerging and developing economies from 64 to 66. So although overall trust is lower, the advanced and developed economies are seen to be doing more to address the shortfalls. And the same trend is actually seen across all 3 components of trust, obviously. So emerging and developed economies are all ahead, but the gap between the 2 is now beginning to narrow. Awareness of how personal data may be used, the difference is now 15 points. Still huge, but better than almost 20 points in 2023, and improved 5 points in the developed economies this year from, developed from 50 to 55 versus 3 points in the emerging. And safeguards to keep data out of the hands of fraudsters, no change, still a 14-point difference, but correcting an almost 20-point gap last year. And again, developed economies improved 6 points this year versus 1 for emerging. Control over personal data, the same thing, also narrowing the difference now down to about 11 points, but again, up 6 points in the developed economies versus 1 for emerging. So we see a better overall perception of risk in the developed world, but greater improvements to minimize risks in the developed. And what actually enables the users to feel in control, to have that sense of ownership. So you can see here, more consumers are now taking proactive steps when it comes to sharing their personal data, how much of it they share, and whether they share it at all. Trust, central to what we're looking at today, is obviously a major driver. If they don't trust you, they're not going to come in. They're not going to start working with you. A 5-point increase in users now saying they only use services they perceive to be trustworthy. Like the first time we've seen a majority say this. Smaller increases here for sharing as little as possible, deleting accounts that are not being used. And then we come to the last 2 on the end here. Again, significant changes. A 5-point increase in people who now actually pay attention to terms and conditions. Whoever reads terms and conditions? Well, yeah, okay. You do, which is good. And I know Jason Lund does as well. And this is 36% of users can potentially walk away if they don't like the privacy policies. Another 5-point increase in tools like digital wallets that we've just been hearing about, used to protect or mask personal data from harm. Right, so today, about ID and wallets, and this is the consumer view on a range of developments, and not surprisingly, those with a clear link to convenience are best received. So although there's been an increase in positive sentiment towards all key developments since last year, apart from chatbots here at the bottom, which is the first time we've included it, facial recognition saw the greatest change in sentiment, and is the only one here actually viewed as a positive development overall, 63% of users. Digital wallets, mobile number intelligence are getting there. It's almost half. We've got 48% of users. But sentiment towards AI and chatbots is still overwhelmingly neutral or even negative. Surprising maybe because as an industry, we're certainly moving down a path which is littered with AI and chatbots. Now, obviously, again, we get different results from different countries that we surveyed. So just looking at the overall sentiment here towards digital wallets, and those that just rated positive sentiment towards wallets. Top 7 countries here by sentiment, again, all mobile-first markets, and where the majority of users rated this as a positive thing, down to Mexico. Italy is also a majority too. And then we get to the average, and below all the developed and advanced economies, with the exception of Poland and Turkey again. But looking at the rankings on your right, in terms of change, it's more of a mixed bag. The greatest leaps we've seen in positivity, India, obviously, we talked about earlier, UK, up 3 as well, Mexico. In fact, 4 of the 7 countries with above average growth in positivity are all developed: the UK, Japan, Italy, and France. So again, we're seeing a similar pattern as we did with trust. Right, the greatest positivity in mobile-first economies, but developed world is beginning to catch up. Right, so data harms. What is the bad stuff that's going on? So these are the main experiences customers, consumers have reported on data harms, far and above everything else, spam, on text messaging and voice. More than half of everybody surveyed had experience of both of these. And on the right, we've got the change, spam messaging, actually up 13 points over the period. Nuisance calls up 8. Next, we've got phishing, spoofing text messages, 41%, emails, 39%, and both of these also boast the highest growth since 2021. On the right there, up 16%. Basically both the cheapest and easiest means of targeting people. And then we're into reports of malware, account hacking, both relatively low, 19%, but that still means that 1 in 5 people have experience of being hacked. And the next highest by growth was company data breaches. You heard a lot about that from Andrew, up 6%, but actually pretty flat over the last 4 years, and still experienced by 1 in 10 people. But although users are seeing more spam and fraudulent attacks, they also feel better placed to manage these threats. So all the measures you can see here have seen significant increases in positivity over the past year. A majority of people have seen improvements across everything we surveyed, like a majority of people. Options to keep their personal data private, up 5% to 57%. Security from fraud, at the bottom, from financial fraud, up 6% to 55%. Safety from malware, viruses, and ransomware, up 5% to 55%. And managing spam, up 7% to 56%. So don't forget, though, at the same time, we're still seeing that double-digit growth in reports of spam and fraudulent messaging, which isn't impacting trust, or overall trust. So here's that index again that we looked at the beginning, and on the right, alongside what is happening with spam and smishing. So we're witnessing here something like an education almost of the end user to disassociate what they're doing online with the attacks they see through messaging, voice, email channels. So by only using apps and services that they trust and sharing as little data as possible and deleting dormant accounts, reading the T's and C's and using tools like mobile wallets, overall trust has grown in the face of the onslaught of smishing, attacks and spam. And they also feel there are better tools and controls available to manage that. So remember the trust by country slide as well, with a two-tiered outlook for developed and developing. So greater trust in the developed world, greater advancements in the developed, in the developing world, greater advancements in the developed. And it's traditionally the developing economies where you'd expect to see most spam and smishing, right? This may be due to the slower rollouts of firewalls, less investment in managed services, or availability of sender ID protections. But this is what we're seeing. That may have been the case a few years ago, but look at the trends in both spam and smishing over the 3 years. You can see the average there at the top in the grey blocks, both growing over the period. Spam up 3% on average, smishing up 2%. This is reports of by all the consumers. But this is only growing because of what's happening in the developed and advanced economies. More spam, up 5% to 51%. More fraudulent attacks, up 7% to 43%. And here it is the developing economies that are catching up. Spam down 3%, smishing down 3%, less now than the developed north or developed west. Again, two very different stories. Right, so finally, a quick look at payments. So across all the markets surveyed, brilliant. An average of 89% of users now buy something or other using their mobile devices as a payment platform. You can see the big jump at the start, over on the left there, coming out the end of COVID, and on the right, the 25 figures for each country surveyed in terms of using mobile payments. Again, with the exception of Canada. Some of the countries have fallen off, so you can't see them. Canada has fallen off, and Poland, maybe Poland, which has fallen off as well. All countries above the average here can be classified as developing or mobile-first economies again. But even at the bottom end of the chart, or the top, that would have been France, which is showing that basically 8 out of 10 smartphone users in France now using mobile payments. You know, it's 80, 79, 80% penetration. I shared this in Barcelona. It shows mobile activities across all the survey countries as well from the last survey. So we tracked 18 different kinds of activities, and this is a selection of the top results showing that what we do remains fueled by entertainment. So we've got social media, music, gaming, video, etc. But payments are the fastest growing area, and why it's important that we have that sort of trust and security around what we're doing. Sending money to friends or family, it's not mobile commerce, but it's transference of money, up 22%. 55% of all users. Online shopping, up 20%. 62% of all users. Paying for food deliveries and takeaways, up 16%. Using digital wallets in shops, cafes and bars, up 15%. And here are sort of the other main sort of payment activities that we see. I already mentioned the top two here, or the bottom two on this chart. Online payments, 62%. Food deliveries, 54%. And so far, we haven't even left home. We're doing all this, we can do all this from our home. Maybe just to the front door. That's the only sort of movement we've made to collect our takeaway. Then we've got over half of us, again, a quick trip down to the corner shop, tapping the phone, coming back with a bottle of wine, turning on Netflix or Spotify, 45% of us, presuming while we feast on the pizza, sat on the comfy couch we bought online, drinking the wine we just got from the shop, out again, a bit further this time, gone in a taxi somewhere, about 40% of us, and home again for some gaming, booking the cinema ticket for the weekend, and downloading or updating mobile apps on our smartphone and tablets. Again, we see different behaviours in different countries. So very quickly, I'll go through this, because I see it's sort of like slowly beginning to click down. top 3 results here, in each country, just about covered 6 of the 8 different sort of payment reasons that we had. The only ones not making it on here were gaming and the app downloads. So green is the top in every country, orange second, red third. So no surprise, online shopping comes in the top 3 for every country that we survey. In fact, it's number 1 reason for using payments in 12 of the 17. Food deliveries is top 3 in 14 of the countries, and number 1 in China, South Africa, and Spain. Digital wallets, using your phone as a payment mechanism, using cafes and bars, top 3 in 12 countries, and number 1 in Egypt, and India, and Spain again. Taxi services and subscription services, top 3 in 4 countries. Mexico spending big on subscription services. And lastly, we've got ticketing just sneaking in the list due to China there with 62% of users. So in terms of payments, that's kind of where and what. So lastly, we'll do how. Okay. So on average, most people are using digital wallets, Apple and Google Pay. And the order that you see here is the same for all types of purchases that we've just looked at on the previous slide. Sometimes the gap narrows according to type, and we do see different preferences in individual markets. But the main takeaway here is security, the red or dark bars on the right. Only 47% of users actually think that digital wallets are safe and secure. And the difference to entering card details or having payments added to your bill, DCB, is minimal. And although DCB is a distant third here in terms of usage, it's actually seen as a pretty fast and convenient method of paying. So most transactions are done by digital wallets, but most people do not necessarily think it is a safe and secure environment. It's fast, yes. It's convenient, yes. But it's not necessarily secure. So again, we're going to have to do something in terms of either educating users or how we sort of present this out there. So I think with that clicking down, I'm going to finish. If you can, there might be time for a question or two, I don't know. You can see all of this.
John has a question.
Thanks very much. That's really interesting. One of the things I think I would have liked you to have touched upon is the real reasons behind these numbers. Issues like liability, issues like, for wallets, for example, whether people, and we're talking about the wallets like Google and Apple wallets, yeah. I assume. Also with regards to the terms and conditions of use, which are, I know, I count myself as typical in these areas where I think, well, look, if there's a problem, I'll go and it's the liability of the wallet company or the credit card company that I'm doing via my wallet, rather than the vendor where I'm having a problem with. So I'm therefore happier to do it because I know I'm not dealing with a load of other people. I can just get my money back if it's not working, if something goes wrong. And it's the same with a lot of the other functions as well. And I just wonder if you've done any research in the fundamental reasons why you've got these variances between different processes. The direct banking, direct card is good, and it doesn't differentiate between personal payments person to person, which is in that as well. Is there more data around that, around reasons? Which is my question.
Okay, so is there context around the data? So I mean, obviously, in terms of the consumer survey, it's a massive piece of research. There's a lot of questions. They answer the questions, we get the data back. The data is there, and we can look at it and analyze it and present it to whichever maybe story you think might be in tune with it. The report I mentioned earlier that's coming out from all of the consumer trust and security and ID side of this, it's due out soon. That will have more context in it. So the report will have context around the data findings. I haven't seen it yet, so I can't tell you. But if you're interested in context, have a look at the report. If you're interested in the data, it's all there to look at and play with. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nope.
All right, thank you so much, Gavin.
Very welcome.
Great stuff. Positive stuff.